Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Welcome to this conference on strengthening partnerships and innovation in Mediterranean non-wood forest products value chains. This conference is at the same time the final conference of the project Incredible, an H2020 project that has come to an end or that will be finishing in the coming weeks. My name is Steven Liebrecht. I will be your facilitator for this session, which is the third and the final session of this conference. I will quickly share my screen to introduce you to this meeting. So let me quickly remind you why we are here together. So obviously, as this conference marks the end of this project, Incredible, we would like to obviously celebrate the culmination of these 3-year efforts based on this intense collaboration between lots of stakeholders within the project consortium with the stakeholders of these innovation networks, as well as external stakeholders. Yesterday, the first day of our conference, we have been exploring major outcomes, more specifically, flagship initiatives, achievements of these innovation work networks on non-wood forest products, as well as innovations that have originated from this project. Now, we explained yesterday that rather than giving an overview of the work packages, the tasks, the deliverables, our aim was to put the focus on the future, and more specifically, highlighting the importance of making non-wood forest products more visible. We did so in the past conferences. For instance, in the policy forum, we were trying to find support, extended support within EU strategies. Even a couple of days ago, we had a workshop where we were looking at how non-wood forest products could be better integrated in the EU research agenda. And today, we will be looking at the EU thematic networks. So the agenda for this conference, well, yesterday we had 2 sessions. The first session focusing on the achievements, policy recommendations, and key project outcomes. In the afternoon, we had a session on what we labeled the Innovation Festival, focusing on knowledge transfer, knowledge repository, and obviously innovation aspect of the project. Towards the end of the day, we had some additional time for networking. Some of you attended this meeting. I hope you enjoyed it. This was the less formal aspect of our conference. Today is session number 3. And this is about the role of forests in EU thematic networks. And we would like to explore lessons learned. So if we take a close look at the agenda for today, we have 2 hours. And in the next 2 hours, we are going to serve you, if you like, the following dish. So first, we're going to have a keynote presentation on new repository on thematic networks, future calls, and this will be keynote presentation delivered by Mrs. Inge van Oost from European Commission DG Agri. That will be followed by a keynote presentation on non-wood forest products in the Portuguese context. We have 2 speakers that will take up that role, and that would then be finished by roundtable, a debate, if you like, on forest thematic networks, lessons learned. Now, just as a quick reminder, the core team of this organizing of this event is basically, we have as a host Margarida Tomé of the School of Agriculture in Lisbon. We have as a coordinator, obviously, Ignacio Martinez de Arano. Both of them have been visible yesterday also. The organizing team is slightly bigger. We have ISA, EFI, for Asset. Summer Broadcasting is taken care of by our partner Aventos. CESA4 is active in the communications and live tweeting. And the names of the people you see in the following line are quite important. It's Thiago Lima, Paula Soares, Joana Paulo, Conceição Santos Silva, Edward Mauri. All of them are working very hard, so to speak, behind the scenes to take care of reporting, handling the chat. And my name is Steven, as you've already heard. Now, as a final slide, I would like to show this. I already explained in the previous sessions that creating an interactive conference is slightly less easy in this online world. So in order to still create this, we provided a variety of formats, keynote speeches, shorter presentations, videos, infographics, panel debates, polling exercises, etc. And also today, we will go for the same recipe. Now, if you happen to be an attendee to this conference, you are basically attending a broadcast event, which means you're not part of any Zoom conference, you're just watching, if you like. Now, if you scroll down to Zoom, if you scroll down the window in your browser, you will see there is a window where you can basically ask questions. So there is a chat window. And we strongly recommend, if you have questions, please do not hold yourself. Post your questions, use the chat to that extent, and we have a team monitoring the chat, and that will help us handle the questions. If you happen to be a speaker, well, you are in a Zoom meeting, right? So it might be that you will need some technical support. Maybe you need to select the proper window in the computer, but we have a team of technicians that are there to help us. So I hope, just like yesterday, that everything will go very smooth. Now, as two final notes from my side, we obviously hope for a respectful debate and chat, and respect for the timings. I'm telling you that because if I give an indication that it is time to move on, it's not a sign of disrespect, nor to the speaker, nor to the debate, nor to the presentation. It is just a sign that indeed we have other things on our agenda and we have to move on. That's all. Final note, this final conference is being recorded. You're obliged to tell you that, and this is done now. This is all from my side. And I would like now to stop my screen sharing. Yes, you should see me again. So before moving to the first speaker, yesterday, just like yesterday, we would like to show you one of these animated infographics that have been created as part of this project outcomes. So let us just enjoy the following couple of minutes, an animated infographic on wild mushrooms and truffles. Alberto? Here we are again. Let me introduce our first speaker that we have for this afternoon. Her name is Inge van Oost. She is a policy officer at the European Commission, DG Agriculture and Rural Development, and she was instrumental in shaping DG Agri's research and innovation approach and Horizon 2020 work programs. And I think I can call her almost the mother of the concepts such as multi-actor approach and thematic networks. So we are extremely pleased that she accepted our invitation to give a presentation here. Mrs. van Oost, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's very kind to introduce you as such. But indeed, we've done a lot of work on building this, and we were not alone. I must really acknowledge that this is thematic networks, multi-actor projects are the result of bringing member states together and looking which are the best formats that they have developed themselves. So we put the best of our member states together in order to produce what is now at European level funded. Okay, so I have 2 slides just for the record to remind you on the requirements of what a thematic networks needs to fulfill.
Sorry, please share your screen.
My screen should be shared already. So is it gone now? How is that possible?
Because they to make the introduction, they have to close yours, so you have to do it again.
But then, okay, I join again the meeting or what? No,
just a moment, ladies and gentlemen.
No, only sharing the screen because it was stopped to have the presentation.
Yes, but then I have to try to get in back because now I only have a few people here showing the grid video. I have the choice to what? What is this?
If you have to initiate a procedure to share the screen again.
Hide thumbnail video. I should not show grid video.
If you just push the button share screen, I think you have to reselect.
Yeah, but it's not there anymore. I only have a very small part of the screen left with you on it. So I do hope I don't have to start from scratch because I don't have here the thumbnails to do it. Yeah. Show thumbnail video, that's the one I have. So,
ladies and gentlemen, this is just one of those technical hiccups, can happen in online events. It's just part of our life. I think all of you have experienced this. I'm sure that the team of Alberto is working in providing the support to address this.
Okay, video, audio. Everything is okay here with my settings.
Please stop to share your screen and start to share a screen other time.
No, the problem is that I have no button to manage the sharing of the screen. So I'm going to stop the connection and restart as we did. I think that will be the best solution.
While you're doing this, I suggest, can I suggest, Alberto, that we show one of the screen tails? I will briefly introduce this. Is this possible technically? So the green tail number 4 that we have scheduled for later on. So I will briefly introduce it. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of this project outcomes, if you like, we have a series of very short videos. Each of them only takes a couple of minutes or even 1 minute, some of them. And it's depicting real life situations about non-wood forest products. And you can find all of the green tail videos in the website of Incredible. And I suggest we just take 1 minute to look at one of these videos. Alberto, can you launch the video?
Encontramos-nos na zona norte de Vinhais, em plena área protegida do Parque Natural de Monte Sim. Nesta zona, situada na terra fria transmontana, a agricultura e a floresta ainda caminham lado a lado.
Na nossa opinião, Grande parte do potencial desta região reside no aproveitamento multifuncional dos espaços florestais.
O castanheiro tem um elevado peso na economia local.
Os concelhos de Vinhais e Bragança são os maiores produtores de castanha a nível nacional, o que faz com que esta cultura seja a mais representativa na região.
O carvalho negral é fundamental para a manutenção de inúmeras espécies de fauna e flora, como sejam os animais de caça maior, javali, corso e veado, ou espécies arbustivas e herbáceas de orla de bosque.
Estes ecossistemas são propícios à realização de várias atividades.
A associação destes ecossistemas levou a que o mel do Parque Natural de Montesinho fosse classificado como uma das 7 maravilhas doces de Portugal. Também aqui as abelhas são uma grande ajuda aos agricultores na polinização dos seus frutos.
Nos chutos e carvalhais são várias as espécies de cogumelos que a população recolhe, seja para consumo próprio, seja para venda.
No que diz respeito ao turismo, várias são as atividades que se podem desenvolver em torno deste recurso.
Acreditamos que são estes produtos, com origem nestes ecossistemas, que oferecem muitas oportunidades para o desenvolvimento local. Nós somos uma pequena empresa familiar, atualmente a trabalhar o mel e a castanha longal, uma variedade de castanha nacional.
Venham conhecer a nossa terra, visitem!
Good afternoon. I'm trying to share. I will share the presentation. Oh, no, not yet. Okay, sorry.
Okay. So here we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're trying to solve these technical hiccups. It can happen. It's not bad. But instead of proceeding with the presentation by Mrs. Van Oost, we would probably better introduce you first to the second keynote speakers, and in the meantime we try to definitely solve the issues we're facing. Now let me briefly introduce. So the second presentation we had scheduled, and that is going then the first for you to observe or to see, is a keynote presentation on non-wood forest products in the Portuguese context. Why Portugal? Portugal is obviously a very important country with respect to non-wood forest products. At the same time, in this period, Portugal happens to have the presidency of the European Council. So it's a honor for us to have an important part of this of today's conference or session spent on the perspective of the of the Portuguese context. We have two speakers. And both of them are coming from the Institute for Nature Conservation and Forests. And this is basically the Portuguese governmental body responsible for nature and forest policies. And we're listening to a presentation delivered by Graça Louro and Conceição Ferreira. The floor is yours. We're muted, Conceição. Can you please demute yourself?
Good afternoon. I had some little problems related to the connection. Are you hearing me?
Yes, it's perfect now.
Okay. So my name is Graça Louro, as you have said. And we are a team, and we work in the Department of Forest Management and Competitiveness in the Institute for Nature Conservation and Forest, as you have said, the government body related to the forest issues and the biodiversity issues. The title of the presentation is, you already know, is Non-Wood Forest Products, the Portuguese context, and we are a team. The speakers, we decided that it will be me and Conceição, the speakers, but we did it together, so it's a team presentation. So the presentation will be developed in 4 main topics. First, I will talk a little bit about the economy related to the non-wood forest products in Portugal. Secondly, Conceição Ferreira will continue with the regulation aspects.
and knowledge networks, and the challenge we face presently focusing the Portuguese case. So in what concerns the economy, first the consensual statements. I have already listened to this type of statements that non-wood forest products are very important to the forest and agroforestry economy. They have an important role in the culture and the economy. They supply raw material, food. They are important in the food security, health, employment, and because they have been used for human populations for millennia, they were integrated in the traditions. Here in Portugal, we have some festivities that are focused. The theme is the non-wood forest products like chestnut, pine nuts, and so on. And so they are in the communities where these productions are important. They represent, they are very important to their cultural identity. And as well, the ecological aspects, because they are very helpful to functioning of healthy forests and agroforestry areas, and to preserving the ecosystem sustainability. So now focus more in detail the economy, the aspects, the general. I think we can just tell that they are general aspects related to the economy. The two indicators which shows, because we could find in fact some values related to non-wood forest products, because it's a really huge difficulty to find some data related to this type of products, are the total economic value and the international trade statistics. Those were the indicators we could find some data. So our national forest strategy, which is a government order that defines the strategic objectives and aims for the forest policies. They base its strategic aims in the total forest economic value of forests. And the calculations that were done there in 2050, the date is there, they show clearly, they confirm that in fact non-wood forest products represent in fact the largest share of the total forest economic value of forests. Here in the pie you can see it, 45% of the total economic value derived from non-wood forest products. And this value, it represents almost 800 million euros. And we all recognize that this value is underestimated because of the lack of sound information and data. The other indicator which shows is the international trade, because we can have relatively sound data from the Portugal statistics that can at least that could make a comparative analysis of non-wood forest products related to other forest economy, to other activities. So here, the indicator which shows it was the international trade deficit from Portugal. The table has the balance sheet, and you can perceive that non-wood forest products have a positive value in the balance sheet. That means that exports represent over more than 800 million euros. 800 million euros in that balance sheet, which is very, very positive, even in Portugal, because the total national in 2019, it was a huge negative value, as you can see in the table. Another way is by analyzing the coverage rates, and you can see that the exports, the coverage rates, the non-wood forest products, in fact, have always the products that we could analyze with this indicator. They show clearly that non-wood forest products are higher. The coverage rate is higher than 1, meaning that the exports are really much higher than the imports. We note the chestnut, which has a value that is very, very positive, as you can see, but also the cork and the articles of cork and the pine nuts. As well, that was the national perspective, but at the regional and local perspective also, I heard the presentation from the colleague from the Northeast Portugal. He was talking about the importance of chestnut in that region. And here, what we have is the maps of some of these species stands that produce non-wood forest products. And we have the pine nuts, the chestnuts, and the cork oaks, and also the cork industries. And as you can see, because of the stands have a regionalized distribution, as always happens, but that is very important because some agro industries developed because of that, and they are very important at regional scale to dynamize the economy, especially in areas like the northeast of Portugal, the interior, where there are huge problems related to because they have a huge the fragility in terms of in the economic perspective, because not so many industries are there. But locally, at the level of the holdings and farms, they are the non-wood forest products are as well very important, very significant, because they usually provide more regular incomes than the other products like timber, for instance, and that is very important to raise the rentability of those exploitations, which is really important. Especially in a country like Portugal, where we have huge problems related to migration and abandonment of forests and rural areas. So this is just a little, we are just trying to show some of the ones we could evaluate with numbers, but non-wood forest products are really important, sought, though they are not, as you have said, Stephen, that they are not perceived as so important, that relevance is not assumed in either in management practice. Usually they have a second place in the options of management, as well in the forest policies. I think they are not always present when the politicians make their decisions, and because there are always issues that come first than the non-wood forest products. And that has many reasons. One is the lack of information, of course. Also, some of these non-wood forest products, here in the slide there are 2 examples. They are perceived as public goods. So the informality dominates in what concerns trade and the economy, and it's difficult so the investment in production is done by some stakeholders, and the profit is not, they don't have the profit of it, so it does not motivate them to invest in management practice. Now I will pass to Conceição Ferreira, because I think I have given the main idea related to the economic aspects and now it will come the second present that my colleague Conceição Ferreira. Oops. Thank you, Graça, and good afternoon, colleagues that are listening to this presentation of the Portuguese case regarding non-wood forest products. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll then present you what are the regulations that we have in Portugal. I'm not in a very detailed way, of course. But it's important for us to show that in Portugal, due to the specificities of some of these non-wood forest products, and especially their economic value, there was an interest since many years to regulate the information and to regulate the practices related to harvesting or extraction or collection of these non-wood forest products. So I will present you three main non-wood forest products: cork, Pinus pinea nuts, and resin. We have regulations for cork since I would say the beginning of the 20th century. As a part of a general regulation that we had to protect the forest richness, the heritage of forests in our country. There were several updates during the whole century, but we had a broader version in 97, and this was revised in 21. The main objectives have been, since the beginning, to have the sustainability of Quercus forests assured, and at the same time the economic value. So there were two main ideas that have been present in the legislation in Portugal to protect forest. Although, of course, sorry, I'll come back. Let me go back, if I can. I think I moved too fast, but let's see. The regulation has, as I mentioned, two main objectives. And regarding the protection of forests, the regulation has some key features that really look at the protection of the stands. And this means regeneration and soil protection, and also mandatory requirements. Those mandatory requirements have to do with the cuttings, thinnings, pruning, where you have to have an authorization from the public administration, and you have also debarking rules. You cannot debark unless you have certain tree parameters assured, like diameter at breast height. And we have a mandatory declaration of cork production after the debarking. So debarking session is in summer, early summer, from May, June. And producers have until the end of the year to send the declaration on how much cork was produced. Of course, this has also some main difficulties. There are some unclarities in the legislation. It's really it's a heavy burden for the administration and for, of course, the forest owners and producers. This has been a legislation that is there for many years and doesn't have the features that we have now, and I'll show it on the next part with some new legislations that was established since 2015. So this legislation doesn't allow us to trace the flows of products. We are not really looking at where that cork goes. And this is not a system that is online that you can use to provide information and request authorization and so on. So in future, of course, there are some developments that we would like to see that imply changes in legislation, and this, of course, it's difficult because it's not the power of the administration. The administration applies the laws, doesn't produce the laws. But in any case, what is in our hands is to improve registration system to become fully digital or online, and to have this linked with other information systems that you have for administrative purposes. On resin, however, we have also had legislation since 30 years, beginning of the 20th century. There were several updates, but there was a major change in 2015. So where we had this objective to protect pine forests by avoiding damages and overexploitation, so basically controlling the way tapping was done in order to increase the value of pine forests, in 2015, the main objective was also to increase transparency along the supply chain. And so the key features, on one side, we still have extraction rules, 3 parameters based, but we added this traceability online platform where operators have to register and they have to provide information regarding extraction, transport, storage, import, export, and the first processing, which means that from the beginning, from the extraction, and before the extraction starts, the operators have to go on this online platform and inform the administration that they are going to start tapping. And the problem, nevertheless, is that here in the resin sector is a question of estimates, because when you provide information to the administration previously, you made an estimate of the amount of resin that you are expected to extract in the whole season. And this is an annual declaration. So we also would like to have forest owners to confirm information, because the operators normally are the people that go to the forest, and they have special companies, small companies, lots of operators, and they go and rent, I would say, pine trees to have this tapping extraction. And what the problem is that to have for sure the legality of the system, and it would be important to have forest owners to validate and confirm information. And so far the number of, and that the system allows for that. But the question is that so far the number of validated declarations is relatively small. So our idea on future development is really to increase knowledge, awareness, and train the forest owners to go to the system and to provide that information. And of course, increase the involvement of all operators along the resin supply chain, and adjust to research and technologies advances. You know, I'm sure that in this incredible project you talked about innovation, and innovation in the resin sector has to be incorporated in the legislation and regulations that we have. Just to show a little bit what is the situation now, we have 261 operators registered. This is the situation in 2020, September. And the idea that we would like to show here is that the extraction, when operators register, they should say in which activity they are registering. Are just for transport? Are they processing? Or are they extracting? And majority, I would say 87% of the operators, they declare that they'll be extracting. And the other, and of course, extracting, then transport and storage. The chain and the number of operators that are on the last part, I mean, on the first processing, it's much shorter. And so, and of course, this means that we have many operators on the field, but they are all providing resin to a small number of processing plants. And of course, just to show you that where are the declarations, we have them here by local municipalities, where is the origin of the resin and the quantity of resin declared. So we have a total of, I would say, more than 1,000 declarations so far. It's cumulative, the figures that I present here, and which means that around 23,000 tons of resin are declared in the system. The pine cone and the pine nuts, we also have a legislation. Protection of was also introduced many years ago, but of course there were several updates, and the major change is in 2015. So we had the idea to increase the value of pine forests, to increase transparency, and the legislation that we had before was on harvesting season, because the idea is that we shouldn't collect the cones if they're not mature, because this will cause problems in the next harvesting period, as the maturity of cones take not just 1 year, it's longer than 1 year. And in fact, in order to increase productivity, we need to have mature cones. But in 2015, we introduced also this idea of traceability. And like in resin, it's previous to the collection, to the extraction, and it's information on all phases of the chain with a platform to register also the same kind of activities that we have for resin. And the main difficulties are really also that the quantities that are first introduced in the system are also estimates, and we have to have also checks on the operators to prevent pine cones stealing. Which is this is a problem that we have with cork. This is a problem that we have with pine nuts. It's resin is not so much because it includes some more technology aspects, but as the things are in open forests, sometimes products can be stolen while we are talking about the stands at stand level. And so the future developments, of course, is to increase knowledge, awareness, and training of forest owners as well. And of course, this is also a broader perspective on how to improve the non-wood forest products on the question of pine nuts. It's really to look at the genetic improvement to increase the productivity of pine nuts and prevent some phytosanitary problems that we have. We have the numbers of operators registered. It's also on harvesting, the majority of them, and of course also on storage, and not so many on processing. So basically the sector has a structure that is more or less the same as we have in the resin sector. Many operators, in this case even more than in resin sector, and the harvest is really the main activity. The declared activity in 2020 was around 217,000 tons of pine nuts declared, and this is basically what we have regarding the pine nuts. What about regulations of other non-wood forest products in Portugal? So regarding wild mushrooms, we had a few attempts to regulate the sector since 2009. But the question is, I'm okay, just finishing. But there's a lack of agreement, and wild aromatic, there was also an attempt that failed. Wild boar is no interest so far. So just let me talk a little bit about the knowledge network. We have several centers of competence where we work together from production to industry with the academia, and we have several centers of competence dealing with non-wood forest products, with cork, with piña and nuts, with chestnut, almond, hazelnut, wild resources like strawberry trees, beekeeping and biodiversity. So we have lots of center of competences, and what do is they look at the problems that they have in this sector to cooperate and expand knowledge, and so they develop a research agenda. And within that research agenda, what do? They have main lines of developing to solve specific problems. And then we have these operative groups. And what we collected now is that we have 19 of these working groups, operative working groups, and 7 are dealing with cork, 5 with nuts, some with beekeepers and honey and aromatics and pine nuts and resin. But basically, cork and nuts are pulling the work together to deal with specific problems and to improve the knowledge. And this is really to look at on the ground, what are the main challenges on the ground to assure that. Okay, and that's it. The challenges. Of course, promoting organization of the system, overcome the bureaucratic proceedings, and minimizing the legal burden while keeping the main features and the main regulation requirements. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking so long.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your speech, and my apologies if I was pushing a little bit up towards the end, but with all the technical hiccups, we are getting a little bit behind the schedule. Now, I think the presentation was extremely interesting, and basically you have been also revisiting some of the themes and challenges that have been pretty much at the focus of the project Incredible. So I think we have been familiar and thinking and reflecting and considering and discussing on how to act upon them. Given the time, I would like to suggest that, yes, we have some questions being posed in the chat. Can I refer, if people still have questions, please keep posting them in the chat. And I would suggest that also the speakers take a closer look at the chat and try to address the questions in the chat. I would be very grateful for that. Now, time to move on. I already introduced Mrs. Van Oost, and I think the only thing I would like to add is that perhaps we are grateful and a bit relieved that if even somebody from the European Commission can every now and then suffer one of these technical hiccups, I think it's just a sign that it can happen to all of us. So thank you so much for trying again. What I suggest is, if it works, we can just go ahead with your presentation. In case we again have one of these technical hiccups, I would suggest that you just proceed in delivering the speech, unfortunately, without slides. And can we give it a try, Mrs. Van Oost? You're muted.
I'm not muted according to the icons.
You're okay now.
Okay. So it just took a few seconds. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So then I'm quite happy to be here with you also to feel for myself, because this keeps our motivation going, and even with a lot of hard work now with the future CAP and preparing the next 7 years for our formats. I was very interested in the former presentation because it brings these practical aspects, and that's exactly what we are looking for thematic networks. So just shortly telling you something about thematic networks, and starting with what are the requirements, which those of you who have done thematic networks will obviously know. So I can go quite quickly on this. So it's all about compiling knowledge ready for practice. And I think with the video we saw and the information I've been seeing on the website, this has been a nice success here. So it's all about what exists already in terms of knowledge, sharing, presenting it, and summarizing it, in particular in a way that it is easy, available, and understandable for practitioners. So this route from scientists, from good farmers, from advisors, whatever, to the broad practitioners, that's exactly what you have to put in place and deliver through thematic networks. And we leave this bottom up. Any subject can come in, but we do want to have the focus on the most urgent needs exactly for our practitioners, farmers and foresters. And I'm very happy that we already had 3 of our thematic networks on forests, which shows the openness not to stick only to agriculture. And we hope this will continue in the future. And we do have to explain that to our experts in REA when they are discussing that a policy need, like more proteins or whatever you name it, is not the same as what farmers need. And that in the projects, they really have to explain that this is a need of the farmer. And this is quite exceptional in many of our topics, or in the majority, we work around policy needs. So this is an exceptional format. We've added along the 7 years, because it's so important for practitioners, that the proposal should also look to cost benefit. What does this solution, so you can make a list of good solutions that you bring together from science and practice. But of course, the cost always plays a role. So also you don't need to do a big modeling exercise, but just try to look to what a certain practice would cost is quite important in the work of a thematic network. Of course, not repeating what has been done already, clearly showing the added value that maybe you can use things that come from other projects, but you do add something on top of that by describing this. And then our output should be appealing. Look to this animated video, nice things. Everything which is audiovisual is nice, whether it's a podcast, a photo, a video, a demo. That's what practitioners want to see. And we also want to see practice abstracts because they connect people. On our EIP website, people can find each other around certain subjects. And this is very important, and I will tell you later on, already now, because it connects operational groups with multi-actor projects under Horizon and vice versa. But there's more to that. I will explain later on. We look for these synergies with EIP operational groups. And meanwhile, in the beginning was a bit difficult, but meanwhile we have over 2,000 operational groups. I see everyday modifications for the transitional 2 years period with more and more operational groups. So it is, again, a concept that is very much embraced and now understood by the farmers. So you can count on many more operational groups coming in this 2 years period, and also when the next CAP is coming with the CAP plans. Definitely countries say they are going to have more operational group, more type of operational groups around different themes, keeping also this bottom up in operational groups. Any new innovative idea or problem can come in. And the way you, as a Horizon project, can find these operational groups is on the EIP website with Find Project, or there's also meanwhile a small database because we only had 600 groups at that moment, but now things are really going very quickly and we have more and more operational groups also showing themselves on the EIP website. But as I put here in red, don't forget that the NRNs can help you. And this is exactly part of the new CAP, where we are building better agricultural knowledge and innovation systems in the countries, that they keep track on the operational groups in their country and that they connect them with the Horizon consortia who are preparing multi-actor projects. And of course, not only at the EU level connect with each other, but of course at local level in the agricultural journals or even television in certain countries still, websites, you name it, the trusted dissemination channels where farmers or foresters would go and look for whatever they want to know. So these are important channels to use. And not to forget education and training, vocational training, because also there you need to distribute the knowledge you gather. And I see that I've probably put it now a little bit too big, because the last bullet here is important. Until now, we didn't say anything in this 7 years period. We didn't say anything about how long a thematic network should last. We saw in practice that many people, because it's 2 million, chose for 2 years. Now, with the disadvantage that as any project, also research projects, also multi-actor projects, in the first year, they struggle in getting to know each other better, understanding exactly the objective, what each has to do, etc. Often there's a core team that drafts the project, and then many others are involved that haven't understood at the start of the project exactly what they need to do. So in practice, we lose almost a year. Not in the best project, but it regularly, it happens too often. So what will we do in the next period? We are going to oblige operational groups to go for 3 years, so that we have at least 2 productive years and hopefully 3 productive years. We adapted also the amount of money according to that. So instead of 2 million, there will be 3 million. But the projects will stay relatively small so that they are easily taken up. We have problems with projects of over 10 million or sometimes even from 7 million that people don't want to coordinate that. They would like to join it, partners plenty, but doing the work to coordinate it is not so attractive. And it's much more easy with smaller projects. So this is also a big advantage, I think, of this concept of thematic networks. Now, I put this in very small fonts that until now, in this period, which is past, it's finished, we're going now to the call 2021 to Horizon Europe, we could allow a little bit of testing. The new scheme, the legal texts don't allow that anymore, meaning that you have to fully focus on sharing knowledge, presenting it in attractive ways, looking for the best channels, etc. Helping in that way, maybe what I saw in the former presentation, centers of competence. This could be a very nice thing to have centers of competences in a number of countries who work together to share knowledge. So there's no testing allowed anymore. It's all about sharing and presenting and looking to these channels that you reach the practitioners. So that's it. Here I have the slides of all the bottom-up thematic networks that we have been able to fund until now, and you will see that not by accident, but because people are aware about which are the main problems. We capture the main problems, whether it is on antimicrobials or on fruit residues, or you name it. If you look to the next slides, which I will not present, you will see that it's a variety of sectorial and also non-sectorial thematic networks. So we have a very nice collection already now, and we're going ahead in the next period with more of that. So I suppose all the presentations will be available for you, so you can take a look at your ease later on what is already there. And as I heard already, 4 are there for wood mobilization and also these other types of things that are non-wood, but that still come from the forest. If you want to attract people who have no clue what a thematic network is, here's a film that can really explain how scientists and practitioners can work together and how nice and useful it can be. So it's just a film to help you to explain the concept of a thematic network from one of our very first thematic networks to a person who you want to join but doesn't understand what it means, a thematic network. Then coming to a question that Ignacio asked me on beforehand, how can you, in a Horizon project, a multi-actor project, because thematic networks are multi-actor projects, so they also have these requirements. I didn't want to focus on those, but they have a number of requirements in particular that they also have to fulfill. But how can you engage operational groups in this? How can it go in practice? So there are mainly 4 roads. And the first one, where the operational group would be a legal entity, is something that seldom happens. In the beginning, some did it, but it's absolutely not convenient because you have to go to establish yourself as a legal entity. There's cost involved, and for a consortium for one project, that's really not a smart thing to do. So this is, let's say, a theoretical road. Then something which we do see happening and more is that one of the partners of the operational group, which is a legal entity, because for Horizon you need to be a legal entity, can be included as a partner or even a third party, and bring in this way the input from the operational group into the Horizon project. We would advise you strongly to describe this clearly in the proposal, because evaluators are looking at that. They know about the strong recommendation to involve operational groups in multi-actor projects and thematic networks. So be as precise as possible and say this and this and this operational group, we are going to get involved in our proposal. And don't forget that during your 3 years, you will come and get acquainted with stakeholders in countries that you didn't imagine you would find operational groups or interesting stakeholders. So you reserve a little budget to finance that. And you can do that, here it is, under number 3, under other direct costs, to cover some expenses for operational group members or also other stakeholders that seem interesting for you to join your project, to participate in the project activities, things that you have not imagined on before and when you were drafting the project. You can put under other direct costs and earmark a budget to do so. Often this is not a big budget, and it's most of the time accepted by the REA officers and very much also appreciated by the experts who have to do the selection. This is, of course, the way to include operational groups in your project. And as I said, you have to describe these activities and the names of the operational groups, where they are situated, as much in detail as possible, because this is the way to convince. If you say, we will involve 10 operational groups, okay, who says it's going to happen? So I really strongly advise you to be very concrete in this way. And then the last one is, in fact, the bad pathway, because you can promise things in your project proposal, but if there's no project budget foreseen for that, people will not believe you, because it's obvious that any stakeholder or operational group wanting to travel to an event, and this is important for practitioners. Of course, we are now all much more at our ease with webinars, etc. But still, it's important to have these physical meetings, and then you need budget. So you might try to put it in your project, but without budget, you will not convince very much. And the best way then still to do it is maybe to add bilateral agreement, not a letter of intent, as often people do, because that is being seen as not convincing, but a real agreement between an operational group and the consortium who is putting down a proposal is an option, but as I said, less strong than pathway 3 on the former slide. So I hope this can help you in this connection between operational groups and thematic networks. And it's really important because the notes that you will get as a thematic network will depend on this connection that you will make. So the idea is to have these green dots all over Europe connected through the NRNs or the CAP networks in the future who know where their operational groups are, and then can connect them with either the multi-actor projects or the thematic networks, which I put here with the little cow or the cereals or whatever they are working about to connect in a European way these operational groups. And in the next call, I couldn't put this on paper because it's not official yet, but we have foreseen a dedicated thematic network type. So we have the usual thematic networks as we have them now, which will be longer, 3 years and 3 million. But we also have thematic networks now who are going to be built based on operational groups. So a number of operational groups who are working on similar, and if you have 2,000, there's already a good chance that they are working on similar things in different countries, so that they come together and they form a thematic network. So based on a number of operational groups. I will have a slide on that later on. So connecting even better these two, because currently the bigger EIP picture of how we connect is on the one side through our EIP networks, on the other side through the EIP website, where you can find all operational groups and multi-actor projects, and our practice abstracts who are in this knowledge repository. But it's only 20 lines because we didn't want to overdo it. It's not interactive. People can't speak with each other. It is a way of connecting, and that's it. And we're looking for the next period to more profound things in which we can connect. But the most important is the one here in red, is that every Horizon project that is multi-actor has this strong recommendation to involve operational groups. And this is what is thriving multi-actor projects to involve operational groups. But the CAP networks and the whole ecosystem in the future must make sure that they themselves are following these operational groups and can present this to the Horizon national contact points as these operational groups we have. Please involve them in the projects that are being developed. So it's all about connections. And if you see this picture, you already see how many different subjects are covered. And to our, in fact, surprise, it's already Green Deal avant la lettre, because 75% of our operational groups are already working on environmental climate issues. They had the possibility to work on anything. You can see all the topics there, from water to soil to competitiveness, whatever. But we have a lot of environmental climate issues. And they even have become a useful instruments to test out future CAP interventions. What you have as competence centers could also be operational groups. And this would give them the advantage that they are better connected and better known by others in other countries. If you do it through rural development money as an ordinary cooperation measure, or with other means, national means, I don't know how these are funded. If you would fund them as an operational group, you will get a better connection and with other operational groups. We will have cross-border operational groups also, so there's another possibility. And your Horizon projects will be able to find you more easily. So it's all about getting better connections. I left this slide just to give you the link here in the bottom of the slide for partner search. This is a link that will still work for a little time until the new CAP starts and the websites will be renewed. But until then, you can still, for the first 2 calls, find operational groups through connecting with the CAP rural networks there. So what's going to change? Until now, we funded innovative projects, multi-actor projects, thematic networks, operational groups. And we're going towards this support to a whole innovation ecosystem that interlinks people and projects that are looking for innovation and knowledge sharing, the agricultural knowledge and innovation systems. And we do this through a cross-cutting objective so that the countries in their CAP plan have an obligation. They have 2 dedicated result indicators that they have to fulfill. So they will be keen on looking for operational groups. It's in fact the 10th objective. We have 9 specific objectives, and it covers all these 9 specific objectives. So it can be on rural areas, generation renewal, landscapes, biodiversity, but also supply chains, viable income, etc. Citizens' concerns, connecting with the consumer. So it covers everything. Here's a little bit of knowledge about understanding what is an AKIS. It's everybody who uses and produces knowledge and innovation. And our aim is to get better knowledge flows between them, to create this innovation ecosystem. And there's a link to a brief, an 8-pager, who tries to explain this to everybody who needs to know. So if you want to help somebody to understand what is AKIS, this is maybe a short way of doing this. This I have to explain because we already had proposals for AFKIS in order to add forestry. This is not needed because AKIS is really cross-cutting and it covers agricultural and rural areas and whatever farming and rural activities, this includes forestry, automatically relate to. So it can be landscape, environment, climate, forestry, biodiversity, consumers, citizen, food and non-food systems. Here we are with your resins and your wood products, including also the chain. So it's really very large. We kept the A because it's a concept that is now 15 years old. And if you start calling Coca-Cola another name, people will not recognize it anymore. So even if it covers much more than the A of pure agriculture, it is very broad and everything fits under it. And it is because our researchers said that this linear model, somebody researches something and then automatically it would flow to the practitioner and be applied. It doesn't function anymore. You have to involve your practitioners. So our big aim in the future CAP is to bring actors more together on a regular basis, having a coordinating body that is responsible for doing that, to keep connection with all these actors in their country, to speed up knowledge exchange, knowledge flows, innovation, and most of all, of course, implementation into practice. So this is how the current AKISs look like. You have plenty of organizations and people who are involved in using or producing knowledge. And some are very well connected, like in this example, advisory is very well connected with farmers, and that's often the case with good, trusted private or public advisors. But then with research, there's already a much softer or unexisting links. And then with many other institutions or people, the links are much more weak. And this is exactly the job that the ACE strategy within the CAP plan needs to do. Look, where are the needs, where are the gaps, and try to make a regular encounter between the many people who use and produce knowledge. Our EIP network will continue with newsletter, with lots of inspiration, spreading the operational groups, but also spreading news from other innovative projects, publishing the focus group results. So every month is newsletter, but also magazines two times per year, and then many events, webinars now, of course, but also networking events and seminars, etc. And then our website with all the material on. But if we see what we've done in these 7 years, we know, and I see a mistake on this slide, we have 34 thematic networks, over 2,000, and it will be at the end of the period more than 2,300 operational groups, because we see in the modifications that operational groups, we see 8 million there, 5 million there, so much more operational groups coming in. All member states have joined. So our challenge now is to manage all this practice-oriented knowledge, how to manage also better interaction, because now it's there on a website, but you can't talk. You can, of course, take the phone or send a message to the people because you have the contact details, but we can do much more if we start up communicating that within all these ACEs that will be generated and help the dissemination. This is our big task now. And that's why in the current period, we were aware that this was coming. We already saw member states themselves creating databases. In Germany, they had from the very start a database. France has a database. Also in Lithuania, there are back offices for innovation support services with databases. But at European level, we did it with 2 projects. One we didn't expect around thematic networks. The thematic network of thematic networks, the Eurechnos project, started. And then the year after was a topic that we drafted, the Eureka project, which was a feasibility study for an EU knowledge reservoir for practice. So that also at EU level, we make this increasing volume of practice-oriented knowledge easy, accessible, interactive, and attractive. And that's why Peter is also with us, because they have already done a lot, and they're moving towards this interactive reservoir. They already have part of their website ready with chats in it, with an expert database and many more things that Peter could tell you about it. So this is coming. So you will be better connected. You will be able to put all your videos, your audiovisual material, whatever, there in full, and it will be kept on the long term. So once your project is finished after 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, it will stay there for the longer term. And this is very important because a lot of knowledge gets lost in this way, and we will capture it now in this way. Now, this one I'm going to go very quickly because you have other things to do. Horizon Europe is very difficult to understand. It has a new structure, new logic. But what is important is that we have plenty of support for our future CAP there and for the interconnections. So quickly, a few slides how it works. We have intervention areas which are co-created. One of them is agriculture and forestry. That's number 3, intervention area number 3. And we have strategic programming with impacts that have brought us to destination with to expected outcomes, all quite complex. But here is where the thematic networks are. Under destination 7, if you look in the work program, you will find early May, when it's published, the calls for this interactive knowledge reservoir to finalize that, to make sure they work with these ACEs. You will find there the 2 types of calls for thematic networks. We also now started up a new concept of connecting advisors all over Europe. We have 2 running ones, but we will continue in the next period to have thematically then advisory networks. So we have a number of things that will really support the future of the CAP and spreading this knowledge and making sure that the knowledge is being used. This is our main goal. What is more, it's not only us, it's not only agriculture, forestry and rural areas, but it is now mainstreamed also all these other subjects like bioeconomy or food systems or whatever, the aquatic systems. Our multi-actor approach is so appreciated that it has been streamlined and it can be applied now to the whole cluster 6. So the full 10 billion topics can make use of this multi-actor approach. Timeline, we will have, as I said, beginning of May, the publication, and then the deadline, I checked with my colleagues only yesterday. Still, they speak about a deadline of September. So you're gonna have to be very quick. There are info days at the end of May to present all the topics, the usual info days that you know. And then it's gonna be 2 working months and 2 holiday months to prepare your project proposals by September. That's the current timeline. And of course, because Call 2021 will follow very soon, it's important to be prepared and maybe really already start thinking what you're going to do. So that's it for me. I hope I helped you a bit with the questions that Ignacio told me about, and also the future for thematic networks. Of course, I couldn't give all the details, but I told you what I could tell at this moment, and I hope it helps you to make more of these nice thematic networks and other projects, operational groups, maybe, whatever. Thanks for your attention, and I'm available for you for questions. I will stop sharing my screen so that I can also see the chat.
Excellent. Well, congratulations for a wonderful presentation. I think it was excellent to have this very clear overview. And it's very clear that these thematic networks have been and are the instrument basically to pick up or to help mainstream solutions and to support innovation. And you explained very clearly the role of these thematic networks, where they have come from, the link with the operational groups. That's all very clear. And I think what you outlined as the future for thematic networks seems very promising. And I think indeed we are all very glad that you clearly stipulated that in fact, forestry is already part and already covered by ACEs. I think that is already something that we all are happy to hear. I have a question for you, if you like. It's a question posed by Ignacio, and he was basically raising the question, well, you have been here and you have been designing these thematic networks. Now you have been witnessing what happened with these thematic networks from the first that was initiated to the ones that are or have been started more recently. Is there any surprise? Because you designed the concept with something in mind, and then perhaps reality gives some surprises, right? So what would have been surprises that you could stipulate or indicate?
You know what, in fact, the biggest surprise is, is that it has become so popular. I still remember when I was defending this with my Director General at the time, 2013 or something, that he said, he was a researcher, he came from research, and he said, what is this for spreading knowledge? This is not research. Why should we do this? So I had to convince him, and we had 5 projects that we planned, and he said, will you find 5 projects who want to do this? So he was so convinced that researchers are not interested in this. And as you all have been able to see, every year we've had 35 until 40, 45 even proposals. So we had the luxury to choose the best ones. And we have been able to reach the practitioners. Of course, everything can be improved, and more communication and more means can be used. Also, over the 7 years, we've seen that the classical written channels are gradually being replaced by animated video graphics or videos. YouTubes are very much used these last thematic networks. So we evolve a little bit like the world evolves. These animated video graphics is typically something that didn't exist when we started. But I would say you will also follow this. You feel the time spirit, and you only have to keep one thing in your head, and this is: how do we get the knowledge to the practitioners? How do we get impact of our work, whether it's research or best practices from advisors? Share it, connect with other countries, because you would be surprised how much they already know, and they can help you, or together, putting your heads together. I had at the time a slide for that, that it's not easy to work maybe with people from another culture or another country, and it can same with practitioners and scientists. It's not always easy because they have other ways of reasoning. Practitioners want the solution tomorrow, and scientists, they see this on the longer term. But from this collision, really the good ideas arise, and it's so good to work together. It also gives you this compensation, this feeling of I would say happiness, that you do something that has a result, which researchers these days who have to publish or perish don't get satisfaction anymore. And that those who engage in this kind of multi-actor or thematic networks, that they really feel and are happy with. So this maybe has been my surprise. We tried it, and it worked.
Excellent. Well, perhaps another question. We have a very practical question, and then one that probably deserves a bit longer answer. The practical one is, we know that many attendees have really been observing and looking, and they are eager to collect this information. Would you be willing to share a presentation? Is that possible in some way? Okay.
Yes, and in fact, Stephen, I should say, I didn't want, because of the time, to explain the multi-actor approach. But of course, this is also a condition for thematic networks, for people who might look to your presentation and want to start something up. I put this at the end after the questions and the thank you. There is also the basics on multi-actor with an infographic and also in words. So you can find that there.
Okay, excellent. I think many people will be grateful for that. And then the other question that came in is the following. Are statistics available with respect to the use of the EIP-AGRI database of practice abstracts? Because people put a lot of effort in creating and completing and filling this database. And I think it would be even more, to say, encourage people to continue to feed these databases and maintain them if we have a view on to what extent are they being used. Do we have any data on that?
Well, we do have, because I have a colleague who is doing the monitoring. And I think we already moved to 8,000 now. At a certain moment, we had 6,000, which was the double of clicks if you compare it with, for instance, the ENRD website. And in the last year, of course, with the growing number of operational groups and the growing number of even short information, because short information is also interesting. People don't have time to read long and detailed deliverables or reports. So it's very, very valued. And I think we are somewhere now between the 6,000 that I'm very sure I remember from one of the slides, and this 8,000, which I think I heard mentioning not so long ago.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for your excellent presentation. Perhaps I give Ignazio a quick opportunity to say some words, perhaps, Ignazio?
No, just to say thank you very much for joining us. I think we are really looking forward to this evolution of thematic networks, how they're increasing, interconnecting, and growing. I think it's very positive that there are additional resources, as you say, more time. The first year is very complex to set up things, and also resources for trainings, maybe for small demonstrations. These things, I think, are very good developments. Unfortunately, we are very, very behind the schedule. We'd love to be with you a couple of hours just discussing all these elements. But now in a roundtable, we'll be extracting our own lessons and reflecting on those future changes. And if we arrive to some good conclusions, be sure that we will share them with you also for the future.
Yeah, I will stay with you for half an hour. It's not so long. So if there's anything popping up, I'm still here.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
We're very grateful for that. So thank you once more for accepting our invitation and for giving a brilliant and extremely clear presentation. We all appreciated that. And it's absolutely brilliant that you can stay with us for an additional half an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the high level of interest in this presentation, we have to move on now to the next step of our menu. And let me, without further ado, introduce you the next topic, which is a roundtable that we're going to have. A roundtable on forest thematic networks, lessons learned. And I have a couple of guests on my table. And let me first invite and introduce the guests, and then we shall just have the debate and see where it brings us, right? So as the first guest, I would like to invite Rosa Mosquera Rosada. She's a professor at the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. More importantly for this invitation, in fact, she is the coordinator, or she has been the coordinator, I think, of the AFINET H2020 project. So that is the Agroforestry Innovation Network. And I think it just finished, if I'm correctly informed. So that's the first guest on the table. Welcome to my table, Mrs. Mosquera. Now, as a second guest on my table, I have Ignazio Martinez de Arano. You already know him, European Forest Institute. He's the coordinator, as you know, of the incredible H2020 project. So welcome again, Ignazio. Let's complete the circle of our guests. Our third guest, well, we have to move now to the US, and we have Jim Chamberlain. He is from the USDA Forest Service, and more specifically also involved in the non-wood forest products UFRO task force. Jim, it is a pleasure to have you with us. It's great that we have been in touch recent month for some of the other events we had, and it's absolutely brilliant that you can join us. Welcome to our table. Now, let's return to Europe, and more specifically Belgium. As our next guest and final guest, we have Peter Spannehoven. He's professor at the University of Ghent and Belgium, and he is the coordinator of Euracnos H2020 projects. All of these guests have a very specific experience and opinion probably also on either thematic networks within the European context, or in the case of Jim Chamberlain, probably in a slightly different context, but it is still about bringing people together and trying to come to constructive collaboration to address issues that are important, relevant for the sector at hand. And it's here forestry or non-wood forest products. So let us first, as the first half of this debate, focus a little bit on your experience and more specifically the lessons learned in these thematic networks, and then focusing in first instance on, well, operating these networks. And in the second half of the debate, we would like to bring the attention more towards how to create impactful networks, because we're not doing this just for the sake of creating networks. It's about making a difference, right? But first, well, let me first ask Rosa Mosquera. Mrs. Mosquera, in your view, you had this experience, the network I think has been completed in the meantime. What are specific lessons learned with respect to running? You have been a coordinator, so you know the drill, you know what it is to bring this consortium together and to make them operate as a consortium towards the objectives. What for you have been lessons learned in this? Can you share with us, please?
Thank you very much, Steven. And first of all, thank you very much to Ignacio, Marita, Tomé, for inviting me to share my short expertise with the European Union project, the AFINET. Well, I think The most important lesson I learned was that multi-actor approach is possible. I am a researcher and really engage it with a multi-actor. I think it's the way to go to make our results more useful for society, which is at the end the ones that are paying. If you ask me what are the main lessons I learned, I can just divide it in people, content, and connections. People, because I was surprised that a lot of people wanted to participate in the thematic network. We got more than 1,500 stakeholders participating in our project, along the project, which is a huge number. They are they wanted to be heard and they want to participate and develop innovations. Also, these people wanted to exchange ideas, develop challenges, innovations, etc. From a content point of view, specifically on agroforestry, was very important because we defined established the set of the main challenges across Europe about agroforestry, economic, value chains, education, and policy. They realized that there are different types of agroforestry that can be implemented in forests and agricultural lands. And I was really surprised because we promised 20 innovations and we developed 96. And finally, I was also really surprised, let's say, about that this grow up a kind of connections among different type of initiatives. I am part of also of Euracnos, Eureka. We did some networks and workshops with Incredible. We found 25 operational groups at the beginning when there were no operational groups almost. And not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe. For example, the Global Research Alliance, which is an institution based in New Zealand, and it's composed by 64 countries all over the world, ministries of agriculture and environment, decided to include a live handbook of Affinet, our main output at the very end, as part of their website to increase the knowledge of these initiatives all over the world. So really, I think that most of the things that I learned were really quite and rather positive. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can all confirm that indeed, by being in one of these thematic networks, you quickly become invited and to some extent even a little bit part and engaged in the other networks. So that's how we also met. So that's certainly one of, I think, the maybe unexpected, but nonetheless very interesting outcomes. Well, that's very nice to hear. Let us perhaps now turn to Ignacio. Well, obviously, we know each other very well in the meantime, but can you make a statement on what have for you be perhaps some challenges that you faced in coordinating and setting up this incredible project and or operating this?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Rosa, for your input. I do agree in many things that you have said. I think for me, I love thematic networks. I've been incredible, but we take part in other thematic networks. In Rosewood, we follow Affinet very closely when it started. Some of our colleagues were in there involved also. But I think they have a strong foundation. This idea of multi-actor approach, mixing researchers, practitioners, policymakers even, and in a positive, forward-looking, solution-seeking discussion, I think is very important to listen to each other, but also the iterative innovation. So what means that you start putting the research questions and questioning the research results and looking if they're viable or not. So it gives the opportunity of the research community to test some of the solutions coming from the lab. Sometimes they are already tower or not. And it also helps practitioners reframing their questions. So I think as you have some time to develop the network, you enter in this logic of iterative innovation, interaction. So it helps focus research, it helps focus the research questions, and it helps understanding and creating trust. But beyond all, maybe the biggest strength is a little bit of unexpected result also. There's a lot of focus about sharing knowledge, but knowledge is available. So when sharing knowledge, what we actually do is connecting people. And I think this is the strength of a thematic network. You connect people locally and you increase social trust and you increase this social capital, but you connect people with peers in other regions, in other subsectors, and then you connect them maybe with decision makers or with other persons that can help them find solutions also. So I think it's not just the knowledge in itself. So I don't think that a knowledge abstract is the real impact. I think it's the connections that are created. and the increase in social capital, let's say, that you achieve.
Yeah. Okay, so it's all about, indeed, is this, in fact, human interactions as the basis to create something that works and that ultimately can deliver an impact. Huh? Well, let's hear from Jim. Jim, we're still staying within the area of forestry, huh? But in your experience, obviously, it's not going to be in the exact same funding contest as this H2020 projects, but nonetheless, it's still bringing people together, trying to work towards these objectives of your task force in this specific case. So what would be your position or a view on what are the main challenges that you face, and what are things that you say, well, in my opinion, in my experience, this is things that I felt needed to be done. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Thanks, Stephen. Excuse me. I think, I've been running sort of networks for many years now, is involved in an agroforestry nitrogen fixing tree association network that was global. And we focused on promoting research and development on these particular trees. And now I'm leading this global task force through UFRO. And some of the things that I found is one is that, these agroforestry networks, they really serve an underutilized and under-recognized constituency that really represents a diverse group of society that is really not getting included in the management of these resources, right? If you look at non-wood forest products across Europe, there's this huge group of people that these networks are now serving, and they have the opportunity to get their voice out there to really move these things, these issues forward. I think some of the challenges is really keeping people motivated and keeping them engaged, right? Our colleague said she had 1,200 people involved in this network. That's wonderful. And I think one of the challenges is for the people who are driving these networks, the individuals or the institutions, is to get those people involved and keep them engaged in that process of moving forward. And that's a challenge because everybody's busy and everybody is being pulled in different directions. It's particularly challenging when you can't have face-to-face contact or personal contact to motivate those people. The exciting part of these networks for me is that it really helps to drive the focus of research that is relevant to the stakeholders that are going to be using it. And I think if we can combine that more and better and stronger, we can advance these networks even further along.
Excellent. It's absolutely very relevant, the comment that you make. I think in one of the previous projects in which also Ignacio was a partner, Bewater, we had this statement of the approach of a science society approach, where basically it was the stakeholder discussions, so the society part, being fed, if you like, by science and scientific insights. And at the same time, it's the societal discussions, if you like, that are giving an orientation towards research in order to stay relevant, if you like. So it's very interesting, this. We need to go to our next guest, but before we do so, can I quickly check with all of you? We had a little bit of delays in the first part of our meeting because of the technical hiccups, like you have experienced yourself. Would it be okay for you if you stay just a little bit longer than the scheduled 4 o'clock? Yeah, I see Jim saying, okay, what about the others? Let me check. Rosa, would that be okay?
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah, Peter, for you as well? Well, thank you for that. This is really helpful so that we can have our discussion in a relaxed way, but still go to the more important bits, obviously. Now, let me turn to Peter Spanhoven. You are in a special position as well because you have been the coordinator of Arachnos, and that means you have the experience not only from within one of these thematic networks, but these specific thematic networks, not all attendees might know this, is basically has been a little bit the network of the thematic networks, right? So which means that you have probably a slightly even different view from all of us. Can you explain, when you experienced both Eurachnos as well as how the other networks have been going, what have been learning points for you?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Stephen, and incredibly for inviting me. I think I have good news because what I learned from thematic networks is summarized in what we call the Thematic Network Explorer's Guide. So you have seen in the presentation of Inge van Oost that you can watch a movie, and you can also find on our website a manual. I would not say it's a do-it-yourself manual, thematic networks, but you can look at it in that way. But in fact, it gives you an overview on how you can have best practices, but maybe it's more good practices on how to involve multi-actors, on how to communicate, on how to measure impact, and so on. So we have listed that, and that is what you just said, as we aim to be the network of the networks, but in fact we aim to serve the networks, not to go on the top, but just to sit on the bottom. So that was a little bit what we aim to do, and the project is now ended, and one of the main outcomes that is maybe for most of you interesting is that Explorer's Guide. So that manual you can find on the website of Eurachnos. So if you click Eurachnos, you will, I think, not find anyone else who has that name, because it was something that we invented ourselves. But I must say Eurachnos is now evolving in its sister project Eureka, and in fact we would like to turn into the term farm book. But again, it's a farm book, it's not a forest book, but apologize for that. But it means that it's just more easier to use, just like you have Facebook or you have Wikipedia, that you have to choose a word. So farm book means that we will have that platform, that digital platform, to store the outcomes of projects like yours.
Okay, good. Well, maybe let's do a next round. And the question now can be, you have this experience. Huh? Now all of us are probably dreaming of, well, let's initiate another thematic network. Mrs. Van Oost has basically outlined the possibilities and the future options for that. If we had to redesign a network or to start again a network, what would we do differently? Could we perhaps reflect on that a little bit? And again, let me start with Rosa Mosquera. What would you do different?
That's a difficult question. What I would do differently, I think my impression, it's not because I was the coordinator, but I think Affinet worked very well because people was really engaged from the beginning. So indeed, I mean, there are things that always can be improved, like, for example, the initial better connection between the different reigns, which were agroforestry regional networks, that could be improved. There are things that can be improved, but they were not considering Affinet, like, for example, the exchange between the different regional agroforestry networks of people. That was done without budget, but it worked quite well. Probably because Affinet was in the second call, I think it's what was approved in the second call of the thematic networks. I think we don't have too many connections with operational groups because they didn't exist. So nowadays I would have prepared it that thing in just in a better way. Maybe what I mean is more that was not dependent on Affinet itself is the timing. The timing was too short, and even if it was just 3 years, because we went for the 3 years, it is too short because you create a network, in our case, of 1,500 people that were working together in 6 meetings across Europe. And now they ask us, what is now? What is going to happen now? And that's a pity, because you have this social capital, human capital already created, and you're not able to because you don't have budget to work there anyway.
Okay, so it's indeed it takes time and a lot of energy to build this network and to create the dynamics you need to have momentum, basically, right? And that's what you were saying, that maybe the initial time, as it was in the initial stage of the thematic networks, probably was not taking that too much into account, which means that you lose an important part of the time already constructing the or building the network. Okay, so that's interesting point.
Yeah, it was the first time, so it was and that was the second call. So there were not. Now you have a lot of information in Euracnos, Eureka, but that time we have to do it, and it took time, a bit more time than needed.
Yeah, so it's taking this time aspect into account. Now, let me turn perhaps to Peter immediately now. Peter, basically what you were saying, I think, could also, your explanation about this guide, you could consider that probably as well. If there is something to do, read the guide, and this would be your starting point. Would that be your advice to somebody starting a network, one of these thematic networks? Or is there something else that you say, well, yes, read the guide, but also this?
So what I learned from, because you're now pushing it in that direction. So when I was a child, my father bought, for example, new television, and then he first started reading the manual on how to use the television, but I was perhaps something totally in contrast to him, because I wanted to start pushing the buttons directly. So what I learned in this project is that people behave totally different, and you have to take a lot of attention to the newcomers, because you have the newcomers who start and want to start directly and will not take the time to read the guideline or read the proposal itself. No, they want to work on it. And this is a point that I think, if I would do it again, take care of the newcomers. And the newcomers, it's the whole consortium at the start of the meeting, but also you have people moving out of the project, and then they are replaced by others, and then you believe, okay, they have to be updated by their colleagues, but that's not what is being done. So I would just say, and this was also a comment from James, and how to keep people active. It means that you have to say, okay, you are there, so I see you and I know you, and if you do it in that way, then they are much more motivated to work on the project itself. So take care, because it's not because it's written clearly in the proposal that they understand it quite well.
So basically, you just as Rosa Mosquera, also you are pointing towards basically something that is part of this human nature of the networks. Huh? It's take care of keeping the network alive, which brings me again indeed to James. So James, you indeed were referring to basically what could be labeled something like stakeholder fatigue within the consortium, but even with a larger group of stakeholders. So what would be your advice, or what would you do differently if you had to start all over?
Well, I think my colleagues make some really good points. This timeline that institutions and funding agencies put on developing networks really needs to be expanded. Right, this task force that we're working on with IUFRA, the original timeline for that was 2.5 years. Well, when you're dealing with people who are very diverse and very busy and dispersed all over a large region, that's a pretty short amount of time to get anything done. And you really need to be able to show results. So one thing I think with developing these networks is to either put no timeline on it at all, or to lengthen that timeline. The second thing I would do then is to really try to enlist a core group of people who will be committed to the network in perpetuity. Now that's really challenging, because most of us, a lot of people are doing this on volunteer basis, and they have lots of other jobs to do that they may be pulled away from. But with a core group of people that can share the burden of facilitating the networks and building the networks, then the leader can step back at times and allow other people to take the lead. I'd really try to identify people who are truly committed to be active in well-defined roles, so that as a leader, you are able to turn to somebody and say, look, I need some help, I need some assistance in this direction, and you know that person will be there and step up to address that. So those are just some brief things that come to mind of how I would do stuff, developing networks differently.
Yeah. I think it's what you're saying here. It reflects also a bit the ambiguity we have in Europe, in the sense that Mrs. Van Olst, she has been creating this concept of the thematic networks. And obviously, if you want to start this, you have to use the instruments that European Commission has or provides, which means you have to structure it according to calls, with project proposals, etc. But then you enter the logic of a project which has a limited timeline, limited budget, whereas you are basically promoting to make sure there is a kind of a continuous effort with people committed, a long-term commitment, basically to the case at hand. Yeah, I think the idea of these roles and this definition of the long, or this indication of long-term commitment is probably a very interesting notion. Now, let's turn to Ignacio. Ignacio, we all know that you have a team of brilliant people. It's always a pleasure to see them doing the things they have to do, because we know, if it's from IFI, we're easy, it will be okay. But what would be your advice to your team if you are starting up the next project?
When we will start the next one. I'm surprised to the level of agreement on this question. My first reaction is that I will spend more time at the very beginning of a project, putting everybody together in the same page, focusing on the core impact and understanding the logic, because as Peter was saying, although we write the proposal in a team, not everybody has the same background and the same understanding of where we're going, and you think that this is an easy part, and I think it needs to be more planified, and maybe less events and less facets and less workload and concentration in the impacts, because we were really, really ambitious in this call. No, but this is a small joke apart. I think the one biggest lesson is that I think we were successful, and I believe Affinet and other networks also, because we were building on existing networks and our actors, our partners had trust, legitimacy, and a center position in the topics. So they could really engage stakeholders. I could really be visible. So in our case, we developed 5 sub-networks, and not all of them had the same maturity level. So I think we launched the same process in the 5 INETs, and some of them are very advanced, and some of them were lagging behind. So I will go for an asymmetric approach. In some cases, you need to invest more in the initial steps of developing. And the third one is also been mentioned, and I think we need to find ways to reward stakeholders. I think one of the difficulties of thematic networks is that it's about exchanging knowledge, but we have sometimes limited means to give back to stakeholders what they're giving to the project community. Let's say stakeholders come, they give ideas. Some of them bring ideas home, but some of them could benefit for more support, more activities, or longer term. So I think this balance about what the stakeholders in your network are putting into the effort are putting, and what the project can give back in terms of real tools, instruments for them to not only to get inspiration, but also to move a bit more ahead. So I was happy to listen all these new developments or trainings are very clearly inside, small or maybe some other activities can be planned. But I think this balance between stakeholders, what they give you and what you give them, is something to reflect about.
Yeah, so it's really about, indeed, to say a number of advices are pointing towards the project consortium, how to structure it, how to keep people involved and keep this as an effective team, all working in the same direction towards the objectives. And then you expand this a little bit also towards the stakeholders, because we ask a lot of these stakeholders, we ask their advice, their input, we invite them to many of our events, and we always want them to come. And it's not only us asking them for our event, which is obviously the most important of all the invitations they have received, but they might have a different opinion on that, obviously, because the other events are.
I think you generate expectations because people they don't understand necessarily the instruments, so they generate expectations and then you cannot feel them, and it's a bit painful. It's a bit difficult sometimes. You generate a lot, and then sometimes you get the feeling that maybe they were expecting more than what you can really give because you have the tools you have. No.
Exactly. So managing these expectations. Yes, Jim, I see you want to intervene, please.
Yes, I would just like to interject about that too, because I think it's really important to clearly define what you want to achieve with the network so that people have clear goals and objectives of that. And I think it's really important to define the kind of network that you're looking at. So are you looking at a broad network like non-wood forest products that are, would embrace a lot of people, or a network that's focused on cork and resin, which is very specific? I really appreciate and like these very focused networks because people can relate to a specific thing like cork or a specific thing like pine nuts. And I may, if I'm in a network that's focused on a larger subject matter like NWFP, I may not be interested in cork. And therefore, I lose enthusiasm when that network is going in this particular direction. So if I could make any kind of recommendation, I would clearly define what the thematic network is all about and what that thematic network wants to achieve in a certain amount of time. And that might be building awareness among stakeholders of people who are of the issues, and that's a good thing. It may be advocating for policy change so that the leadership puts more investment in something like cork or resin.
Yeah. Yep. Indeed. And I think Inácio already pointed to the fact that we have these 5 distinct networks, and not all of them were at the same level of maturity. Maturity has nothing to do with the maturity of the people. It is about the maturity, the status of the network. Is this a starting network or already a network, an existing network of actors that know each other, that have been cooperating in several years, etc.? It's a difference. And that's indeed, we try to go for a focused approach in Incredible, but at the same time, we still have to follow a kind of a logic that was dictated by the overall approach valid for all the networks. And I think that's a very fair point that you make, James, and it brings us basically to the second half. It's an excellent bridge to the second part of this discussion, which is about...
Maybe you can, Inge has raised in the hand, maybe you can give her the...
Oh, I didn't see this. Yes, please, if she can intervene, if we can arrange...
Just very short to say that what Jim mentioned is one of the key things in my view, in my overview of all the 34, and the time that sometimes gets lost in the first year. Remember, I said so. It's all about the preparation, defining well what you are going to do together. And that's where we sometimes lose months or even a year. So this is super important. And what a way of starting, helping this is what we do in operational groups. There we fund the preparation process. And some countries even do that for multi-actor projects or for Horizon projects in general. So that, in fact, the people get to know each other, they build up some trust. They discuss exactly, because it's only when you start saying which action shall we do and do we agree on all that and what is our cooperation agreement, who does what, that you really get to know each other and get to understand what needs to happen. So this whole preparation phase, in average, in research, in my view, is not well developed. And we have a dedicated topic on that in the call 2021 or 2022 to see for Horizon if this can work. Why? Because under the CAP, we had the advantage that we had we have tried it out from the very beginning. And this has been not an immediate success, because some countries, particularly in the East, found that it was wasted money. If you can fund your project, why would you lose then time for this preparation process? But it's in fact the other way around. By having a good preparation process, getting to know each other, getting to know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who will be the boss, who will do what. This is what makes your project proposal good, probably selected, and which helps you to gain a lot of time.
Yeah, so you're pointing to the preparation phase, indeed, to basically address a number of the issues raised proactively, in essence. Yeah, I'm looking at the other guests if they want to say something. If not, well, let's move on, because it indeed brings us to the second topic I would like to cover in this panel debate, and that is about, we don't do this thematic networks just for the sake of networking, right? We try to address issues. We try through this thematic networks to make a difference, to create an impact, and preferably an important, tangible, and a lasting impact, right? So the discussion now is on what could we do to, even if we have a network that will be operating in a nice way and people are working in the correct direction and everything has been planned, etc. But even then, what can we do to ensure that we achieve a higher degree of impact? What would be your ideas on this? Who would like, from now on, let's just see whoever wants to respond. Who is willing to take up the first?
I'll start off with that.
That's great. Thank you, Jim.
Well, I think it's really important that the networks demonstrate the importance and value of this issue to a large number of stakeholders, and to do it fairly rapidly, if maybe that's not the right word, but very quickly be able to articulate how important this issue is to a large number of stakeholders. And then I would also suggest that we, again, build on having tangible goals and objectives, something you could show people, right? That would be the second thing. And the third thing, I would be as flexible as possible, because as the network develops, new ideas come in, you want to be able to address those issues as a group. The organizers may not have realized or identified issues that the stakeholders think are important. And so to have an effective network, you've got to be able to adapt and move in directions that the stakeholders think are important.
Excellent. Good. Well, Ignacio and Rosa are immediately raising their hands. Ignacio was first, I think. So go ahead.
Rosa? Or who?
No, I guess go ahead. I can speak later.
Okay, thank you, Rosa. No, I was thinking, and this idea of flexibility is important. I was thinking that we're spending incredible almost 1 year designing our knowledge repository. Really thinking, who is the user? Who is the end user here? And I think forest has a special component in terms that it's a very strong social ecological system, extremely regulated. It's not your farm when you have a lot of regulations but quite freedom to do. In the forest, sometimes you have too many eyes, and people is not professional workers, and there is not an extractor AKIS. So this means a lot of things. So who is going to use my fact sheets? For whom am I writing them? And we interview many other thematic networks. We interview Affinet, of course, others, trying to reflect how to get it right. And at the beginning it was easy. We'll do a thematic network, a repository. And when you start on it, you say, wow, but how I maximize the impact? And I think you need to be prepared with different tools to answer different types of problems. Because in this, let's say in this forest setup, many of the problems of your stakeholders and needs for innovation are beyond a technological solution. Many times they have to do with regulation. They have to do with other issues. that are not easy to tackle, or lack of profitability of core. How we tackle this? So we imagine solutions for these problems, and I think we really succeed in some cases. But I think this flexibility of mind and to have a portfolio of tools to support, or you can say give the right knowledge. Find the right knowledge. It's not always a technology. It's not always the outcome of a project. Sometimes it's something else. But yeah, I think it's to be focused in the impact and to be focusing in solving these problems, understanding that many of them are social innovation issues, some of them are really technology, some of them are regulatory, normative, or issues.
Yeah, so it's really about putting these end users central, try to understand their concerns, the things that they are struggling with, and then it helps if you have the flexibility and that you can adapt your project to accommodate and better address these needs. Okay, interesting. Well, Rosa, perhaps to you then.
Yeah, my main problem with the impact is what do we mean by impact? We have this discussion within the Eureka and the Euracnos project, and I'm quite convinced that at the end, the impact will be maximized after the project ends, because we are preparing a lot of the thematic network, a lot of documents and the repository and fact sheets and practice abstracts, etc. But there is no time to measure that impact. So I think that to really measure that impact, we have to have, there is more. They should be measured later on, not when we end the project. But and then you don't have maybe budget to just maximize even more the impact. But this could be solved through the connection with other projects and this engagement with other projects and these aspects that are mentioned in the calls of the European Union that says, build up on previous projects, maximize the impact of what we have been done before for what we are going to do later on, because we know what we did and we can construct upon it and move on that. But the question of impact, even if we all fill the participant portal with the things that we did, really is just the beginning of the impact. What we put there is not the real impact that probably should be measured 5 years later.
Exactly. So it's about.
That's my comment.
So sometimes it just takes time to grow this impact, and it can you only become tangible even after your project has finished. So the challenge of how to measure this is not easy. So maybe you want to respond to this, Mrs. Van Oost?
Yes, to confirm what Rosa said, because many of our thematic networks and also the other projects, operational groups, multi-actor projects, they work together for the time of their funding. But what we see through these 7 years of new concepts is that, in fact, we created a whole ACIS community. So these people stay not only within the network of their own project, but as Rosa said, also start connecting with other projects, because they know now the value of this way of working. And what we have now is in fact a whole community of people wanting to share knowledge, an ACIS community, as we call it, who are convincing their colleague researchers, their colleague advisors, their colleague. So it's in the people. I think Jim also spoke about it. The important is not only the output. Of course, this is the means. This is what you do, and this is your work. But by doing this, you create these networks and this trust, and you pick up the phone, and you might stay friends or colleagues for your whole life.
Yeah, I think we can even add to that in Incredible, at some point we start to realize, just because we got a better view on the real issues at hand, we at some point decided, let's make sure we have the deliverables, because that's an obligation, that's a contractual obligation. But I think in that they started to talk about these flagship initiatives that were not even covered literally, but I think this will probably be the things that might last the longer. What do you think, Ignacio?
No, it's true. It's true. We need to. You feel that you have identified one area that will really make a difference and is really useful and valuable, and you see the enthusiasm of the network and say, let's focus energies here. And we came with this new concept, flagship initiative. It was not in the document of action, but we thought it was important and some INETs were developing this, so we said the other sub-networks, you also identify one and you focus on that, and you create your fact sheets around it, and you create your activities around a flagship that will really make a change and will really give a legacy. It was a little bit the same with the white paper on policy during all these so many workshops and discussions in different setups. We were distilling policy recommendations. I was telling you before, stakeholders, you say, how can I help you? You go to the truffle growers. How can I help you? Pests, diseases, water, irrigation, what you need? And he said, no, my problem is that I don't have water rights because the water rights are in the crop down the valley. That is not profitable, and I cannot irrigate a little bit that I need because I don't have. So the problem of stakeholders sometimes is something different. So I was telling you, you have a contract with them. And so we collect all these policy lessons. We did have a policy forum to discuss policy recommendations, but then we converted this in this white paper, and we really worked more intensively on this. The white paper was not described in the document of action. It was described a policy forum and some policy recommendations. But then we raised the level of this, and I think we partnered with UFRO, we partnered with FAO, and we have really delivered something that the stakeholders recognize, their ideas there, their needs, with input of science. So I think we really increase the ambition. This is, I think, what Jane was saying about flexibility a little bit. I think our Horizon Europe, our instruments, you plan many years ahead, precise milestones and things and events. But of course, there's always some room and discussing with the project officer, and you can accommodate some of these ideas. The trainings we did in Cork, all these things, some of them were not in the document of action, but we went for them, yeah.
Okay. Maybe, Peter, you would like to add to this?
In fact, I was just thinking to add another point on the table, because you can make nice fact sheets and so on, and then you can distribute it, or you can have nice YouTube movies and you will put it on the website, or you will share it with people. But then you have to look at the needs of the people, because suddenly they wanted to know, and that I noted down during the presentation of Inge van Oost, what's the cost benefit of that solution? And then, okay, they will not find it in the knowledge object, but if you have no, and that's what we call metadata of that knowledge object, so nobody will know who was the creator of that object. And if you say, okay, but it was already filmed 5 years ago, it's old news, so it will not be good anymore today. So what I wanted to say is that what's one of the observations to help to raise impact, it means that you also have to think very carefully about your knowledge objects, about your movies, about your infographics, about your, I don't know, fact sheets or guidelines or manuals, that you clearly indicate what we call the metadata. It was, okay, when was it done? Who was the creator? Who was the expert behind it? It was the incredible project and so on. So this is something that we missed in our observation of the existing thematic networks. It's thinking very well about, okay, this is now something that is very useful, but also you will have to make it findable across Europe. And it's not only in the network countries, but it is broader than that. That's one thing. And the second point I wanted to put on the table is, okay, you have content, but how will you transfer this content to the user itself? And one of the experiences that if you don't have a professional communicator, if you don't have a professional dissemination office which produce high quality material and so on, so which maybe translate even your knowledge in a much better format than you can do. And you know that I'm from university, so I'm not having that creative mindset in my head to make all things so nice. So if you want to improve or highlight or work on impact, I believe also a professional person or professional organization who helps you with that information to transfer it, to translate it to the forester who is working in the forest, and that he sees it as he wants to see it, then I believe that if you pay attention to that point, so first of all, content, okay, high quality content. Secondly, how to do the transfer to the user. Then I believe that you will have done a good job at the end of your thematic network if you pay attention to both topics.
Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely correct to say that it's the idea of these thematic networks is about transferring and disseminating this knowledge and these good practices, etc. Right? It's science to practice, basically, and not to practice in one place, but preferably in as many places as possible. And you're going in this direction of making sure the content is the right content, the format is okay for the users, and we have the metadata. So I see that Ignacio was.
If I can add a little bit here, I think this, of course, communication is extremely important. But it's also we all know it's very important. This what is called the farmer to farmer and the farm to farm innovation and a practitioner to practitioner, and I think we had in our project several of these science to practice days, and along the way we transform them, discussing with the project officer also in some more structured training with more time and resources, because some of things you just cannot communicate broadcast to the world. The word trust has come several times. Once the network advances and you develop this trust and you understand each other, then you can really replicate practices like we did with this Cork quality measurements and observatory that our fantastic Portuguese partner transferred to other Mediterranean regions and areas, and that really can make a common market for Cork, so you see, and a better position for the owners. But this requires a lot of trust, understanding, and then you have the instruments, things that you could not. Yeah. You can have it in the web, you can broadcast, but you will not reach the people. You discuss in the field, you discuss outside the field, and then something comes that it makes it possible, this knowledge transfer. So I think it's a combination of these two elements, very high quality management, very good communications, but also this emphasis on not only science to science or science to practitioner, but also practitioner to practitioner, let's say, which there are many, many innovative cases.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ignacio. I'm looking at the time, and my dear guest, I think we could probably continue for another 2 hours, because I think it's a fascinating discussion, and for sure we haven't covered even a percentage of the things that could be discussed here. Now, before we leave, can I ask you a final question and a short statement as a response? Because we've been talking about the human side, structuring the project, the goals and objectives, involving the stakeholders. There are so many aspects. Now, let's imagine that each of you would be a queen or a king for one day, and you can take one decision, only one, and you decide, you say, I love forestry, and I will dedicate my decision for the better sake of forestry, and my decision will be granted. So whatever you do, it will be executed. Whatever you decide, it will be executed. Now, and you want to take a decision to basically help this forestry thematic networks. Yeah. So what would be your decision? Let us start with the first queen, perhaps, Rosa Mosquera. What would be your decision? One decision, it will be granted.
To push forward agroforestry in Europe, you mean?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I definitely go for agroforestry. I think all of you know. Probably I will try to better engage policymaking with the people. That is very really disconnected. It has been done a lot of effort to improve it, but it's still really disconnected. I think that the whole history of the SCARA case and the EAP Agri changed not only the way of doing projects for researchers, but also the way of thinking from policymakers. Policymakers are asking us about how to do policies, but that was not like that before. So I think that could be my wish, because that is the main way to move agroforestry in Europe. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. To have a better integration of these. Okay, good. Well, Jim, what would be your response? You are a king this day, and you decide, and it will be executed, your decision.
King for the day. Thank you, Stephen. I like that. I think I would direct my institutions that to fully recognize these products, these agroforestry products or these non-wood forest products, fully recognize their importance to our national security, that they are natural resources, and they should be considered and fully managed in the direction of our natural resources. Okay. So fundamentally, to recognize that these are natural resources and to direct the institutions to treat them as such, that they are essential to the national security of the countries.
Good. Well, your wish will be granted, I hope.
Thank you. My work is done here.
Excellent. Peter, let's switch to you. What will be your wish? You are the king for the day. You're muted, Peter.
So I believe that I would make much more publicity for the value of forestry for the man in the street, because I believe that if you look at the man in the street, then he looks with different eyes than you and me, because you're involved in forestry, then you believe, okay, this is very high valued. So I think that I would do a daily publicity campaign. But I had also another idea. It's not imagine if you would remove the highway and if you would put a big forestry in place of the highway in a country like Belgium, then you would... It would be incredible how green our country would become. So that's maybe another idea for the queen of the or the king of the day.
So we have the institutions, we have this border between policy making and research, we have awareness, but you also would like to substitute our highways in Belgium with forests. Ignacio, if you would be the king today, what would be your wish?
If I was the king of thematic networks, because I understood your question in two sides, the thematic networks on one and forest on the other one. If I was the king of thematic networks, I would like a scheme, for example, where you can, if the network is functioning, you could renew it for a second term. Yeah. Or even with maybe with decreasing funding and co-funding, but a way that you could really extend it. If something that works is a small jewel, and sometimes it's a pity that there is no all therefore done, that you just stop there and find a different project, different proposal. So I will, in my dream, as king of thematic networks, and as king of forest in general, I will say, I will like a blanket of empathy. I think that when we come to forest discussions, we lose empathy very fast. And we have a policy environment and a societal environment very polarized, and we don't understand each other a lot, and we don't make the effort. So I think that the empathy we see inside the thematic networks could be an empathy that expands to let's say, the general discussion about forest and nature.
Okay, excellent. So your wish will be granted, at least I hope so. Let's see tomorrow what remains of our wishes. But I would like to thank you so much for the excellent discussion we had, for your willingness to be part of this. I hope this discussion has provided or created a little bit ideas, perhaps, some suggestions that maybe also Mrs. Van Oost can find interesting and can take up in a further. Maybe she would like to respond or have a last word before I close our table. I'm looking at her.
Well, I think I should congratulate you also as a moderator to ask such interesting questions, revealing a lot of useful guidance, useful possibilities. Maybe I should add a little correction to Ignacio. We can renew thematic networks. There's no issue with it, as long as you don't do the same. So the way you would draft your project should seem different, even with all the same partners, no problem. But it would be difficult to convince evaluators to do exactly the same with exactly the same partners. Imagine you are in their place. They will say, okay, we have others here who are going to bring much more. But if you really can showcase that you are bringing additional actions, additional efforts, additional partners, whatever, we already have a number of thematic networks who could continue for another period. And then our old ACEs will help, because if in each country we have ACEs who know about operational groups, who know about the thematic networks, who need thematic networks for their training, vocational training, for their education, etc. So there will be, through the ACEs that we put in the CAP policy for the future now, we create a need for that knowledge. And this will probably open for you the doors to other types of funding. Not only just continuing with additional activities in another thematic network, but maybe giving you, we have this under Article 72, a study in which you present for the schools, the agricultural schools, for the vocational training, a package of educational material based on what you already have. I'm just inventing something. Other things can happen too, or make links with consumers. It's very fashionable now. So bring your message to consumers. Could be a new project, could be an operational group, could be a new thematic network, whatever. So I think with knowing better what everybody is doing through this ACEs, I think new ways for funding will open. And I want to emphasize, which is very important, we see this, for instance, in our operational groups. We have the Irish Rural Network, and they are masters in communication. Not only them, but you have in other projects also very, very good communicators. But I just give this example. But they tackled with their operational group a very difficult thing, which cost lots of money, 25 million for one operational group to save a bird, a rapture, the hen harrier. So this is not where farmers are dreaming about to put their CAP funding in, you can imagine. And with all the positive communication they did, they turned this in a complete success story, and got the farmers behind and trying to do their best to have a hen harrier on their land. And so communication is so important, not only to have a whole group around you who is helping and supporting you, but also to be known and maybe to find other funding sources, other kind of tasks, and to continue with the rucksack that you already have into new ways, new kind of activities, maybe on the same topic. So communication is very important. And if there's one thing that certainly for the usual research project, but even for our multi-actor projects, thematic networks and operational groups, we can still improve is this. We have managing authorities who put this explicitly in their call for operational groups, that they must communicate here and here and here. They know their own communication channels, so they make it easy. They say, you will communicate here, here, and here, and here. And this works much better than to leave it to those who have proposals, who maybe don't know these channels, and have to invent, maybe have no connections with it. If the ministry says you must do this and this and that, it will happen, because it's part of the contract they make with the ministry for their funding. So this is a simple way already how you can force better communication, more dissemination. The peer-to-peer, which I also heard, is so important. So this is maybe what I can add to already this very rich discussion, and I congratulate you very much. It's not lost time for me, although there's plenty here on my piles. But it's always good to listen and to hear you talking about this. We can always learn.
Thank you so much. I think we hope that at least that we can interpret the fact that you stayed so long with us, even for the entire duration of this roundtable. I think we hope it can be interpreted as a positive sign of your interest in this discussion. And we are extremely grateful that you accepted our invitation, not only to bring this presentation, which is extremely interesting and very valuable to all attendees, not only for the people here, the strict team, so to speak, but for all attendees. So thank you for this, and also for responding to the debate we were just having at the round table. Which brings me to probably the moment when I have to say goodbye to the guests at my round table. So thank you, Rosa. Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you very much for you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Ignacio, for having this debate and bringing in the arguments you had. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to move on. And the next point on our agenda, well, is the concluding part. And we're more than half an hour behind schedule now, but I hope this has not been, this is not just a case of us managing our time badly. I think it was an interesting discussion we had, and we were just interacting with each other through WhatsApp to see, can we prolong? And everybody said, yes, go ahead. So we did. But as we are approaching the end of this conference, I would like to bring in Margarita. Margarita, as the host of this event, I think you have been observing, you have witnessed, and I'm quite sure there are a number of conclusions or observations that you are willing to share with us. Yes, you can speak.
Okay.
Yes.
Now it's time to finish this conference. It has been a pleasure for me to organize it. It has not been an easy task, but I think that we have had very interesting discussions. But one of the most important conclusions that I learned from the roundtable today is that thematic networks can be continued. I think this is a very important conclusion, because I think that we have achieved a lot in our thematic network. It has been a project very different from the ones I'm used to work in, because I usually work as a researcher. And now we have, of course, as a researcher, I have always worked in applied research, but it's completely different if you have a project that is focused on the transmission, on the linkage between knowledge and action. And this event showed exactly that it has been possible to produce a lot of tools, documents. We had a lot of events that were real important in order to improve the profile of non-wood forest products in Europe. And in fact, in my opinion, this is real important. If we want to move to a bioeconomy, to a bio-based society, we have to improve the quality of the rural environments, because we will depend on them if we want to move to a new bio-based society. And non-wood forest products can be a good contribution. Yes, so I was very happy to listen from Inge that maybe we can do more for non-wood forest products. We have built this nice network. We have to change the objectives. Of course, we have to find new alternatives, but I think that's something that I invite all of us to think about, because it's very important. And before giving the word to Ignacio, I really want to thank the participants, the speakers, the participants in the roundtables, but also all that participated in the organization of this conference. They are all important, all the EFI team, ESA team, but certainly Stephen is someone that needs to be thanked, because you have been an incredible addition to the incredible project. as Peter mentioned, it's very important. We are researchers, we are professionals, we are foresters, and if we really want to make stakeholders engagement, to make a good dissemination, a good outreach, it's very important to get professional support. And I learned a lot with you, Stephen. I think I learned a lot, and it has been very good to have you involved in the project. So, of course, I also want to thank Ignacio, because without him, this project would never have happened.
Well, thank you so much.
I finish because we are a bit late.
Thank you so much, Margarita. Maybe indeed, Ignacio, as a final word.
Well, I want to say yes, thank you to the person that we are here inside the Teams room and all other ones that are looking in the web. Thank you for joining us for this final conference. I think we promised yesterday that it was going to be forward-looking, that it was going to be a festival of innovation, and I think we were up to the challenge. I think we saw many voices, many different people, fantastic projects, our knowledge context, our open innovation, bringing actors outside of the room. So I hope you really enjoy the show as a festival of what we have achieved in these years. I think we have been in contact with the best companies in the world in some of the aspects, in natural resin, in commercialization of berries or mushrooms. We've been with the resin tappers, with the collectors in the field, with the farmers of truffle. We've met in so many setups, and we have overcome the difficulties of the COVID. And we really think that we have developed trust and a network. We have some very concrete examples and ideas in a really full repository of knowledge. We have a lot of to-do homework for the future, and we will really look for means to continue this forward in whatever setup is possible. So from our side, I want to thank you all of you for playing all the games we have decided to play. And when we said, let's have a community of practice for INET coordinators, animated by Stephen. So you say we're not professional animators of networks. Let's learn from each other, and we all play the game of the community of practice. We play the game of the knowledge content. We play the game of the repository. Everybody has joined and engaged very actively. So for all the inner circle of the project, just immense thanks, and for all the stakeholders that have given us so much in terms of ideas, in terms of experiences, and they have come to share them with us. Also, thank you very much. So, what else can I say? That this is, hopefully, is the beginning of a good friendship, as the famous movie. Is the beginning of the continuation. No, is the first step on the future of this network. Doesn't need to be a network as it is now, but a network like ours that will expand, will change, will morph in the future. So just to remind you, our incredible partners, we still will have one session, a final conference for our internal mergers. So this is the public part of the final conference. So just to say a goodbye to our stakeholders, stay tuned to our channels. We will come back with more.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ignacio. I think at this moment it is time to say goodbye. So I wish all of you lots of success. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you again. Goodbye.
And I didn't say thank you for all the organizers, of course. And